So I started this morning to ask you the question, what is the craziest thing you have ever done for love? In other words, to what lengths have you gone for the one you love? Has love ever inspired you to make some ridiculous, vaguely over-the-top declaration or take some kind of action to proclaim your love to somebody? I know for me, it was my second date with my now wife, Michelle. This is how I knew I was in love. She invited me over, and she was going to make dinner for me. And so we went grocery shopping before dinner, and we're at the Giant in Northern Virginia, and we're walking through, and she says to me, "Oh, do you like scallops?" She says, I can make scallops. Would you like scallops for dinner?" And I said, "Absolutely, I would love scallops for dinner." So we went back and she started preparing. I should add to this story, I hate scallops. I absolutely detest just about every form of seafood ever created. I know I could be wrong, but I'm not. I just don't like seafood. I absolutely hate scallops. I think they're disgusting and they're chewy and they're gross. Ask me how I really feel about scallops. Would you like scallops for dinner? I would love scallops for dinner. So she made me scallops and she put some out on the plate, and guess what I did for love? I ate those scallops. Not only did I eat those scallops, I had seconds. I'm sure I've done some other silly things, but I don't think I can repeat them in church. Now, there are other stories that pop up from time to time in the news of how people have tried to be romantic, particularly with marriage proposals. One young boyfriend paid to have a marriage proposal flashed across the Jumbotron at a baseball game. Another gentleman proposed to his girlfriend outside the window of morning television while millions of people watched. One young woman was so tired of her turtle-paced boyfriend waiting for him to pop the question that she baked a cake and put an engagement ring on the top. She was very subtle about that. One of the things I like to do when I meet with couples for marriage preparation is I like to find out how they proposed. One young man went to great lengths. His girlfriend was on vacation at the beach with her family. And he worked it out with her family and created this tiki torch path along the beach to this nice little area, to put a carpet down so he could kneel down on it. And her family brought her out, and of course confused and walking through these tiki torches where he's there kneeling with the ring, and she starts arguing with him. "What are you doing here on my family's vacation? You weren't invited." I would have put the ring away, because if that's any indication of how the marriage is going to be, but no, he said, asked the question, she said yes. Another creative spirit invited his girlfriend into a plane he flew so they could go for an afternoon flight. And he flew over his home where his family and her family were standing there all holding a sign, "Will you marry me?" I like that one. But what this reminds me of is each of these people took a risk. These gestures could have gone horribly wrong. But instead, these unique ideas each had the desired effect. Each said yes. Which reminds the romantics among us that daring openly to express our love can have wonderfully satisfying results. Love can also invite sacrifice and determination at any age and under many circumstances. Consider the mom who, after a long day of all-day meetings, drives all night so she's not to miss her first grader school play. Or the dad who sits at his desk every day and writes a letter to his son during his year-long overseas deployment. Or the insurance agent who, after discovering he is a match, donates his kidney to his office worker in the next cubicle. So the real question, perhaps, is what wouldn't you do for love? I mean, there comes a time when it's not enough to simply declare your love verbally. Words can seem empty without convincing actions to back them up. I mean, a constant theme throughout love stories is this celebration of a tangible and visible devotion that's on display for everyone to see. Love is more than a feeling. Love is, in fact, an action. Our opening psalm ended with these words. Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for He is good, for His steadfast love endures forever. The psalmist sings God's love song for the world to hear as God's unbreakable covenant is proclaimed. God's steadfast love is recklessly poured out onto God's beloved. It's this enduring covenant, God's promise that His steadfast love will endure forever. In the reality of not knowing what will happen to you, the hardships, the challenges, the difficulties, God is promising through this psalm that His steadfast love will endure forever. This is what God would do for love. God enters into this relationship wholeheartedly and without reservation, declaring an unending love without abandon. The kind of love that demands courage, a courage that God continues to show. As we conclude Advent today and segue into Christmas, we're fully aware of where God's love is leading us. It might begin in the softly starlit manger, but it will inevitably lead to the harsh noonday sun reflecting the cross. And God knows this, and God doesn't shy away from the pain that is coming. God's extravagant love is demonstrated in God's willingness to give sacrificially. God bestows the most precious gift in the person of Jesus Christ, knowing that this gift won't always be appreciated or honored or at times even recognized. The gift of Christmas is that God looks at the cost without blinking. The gift of love is a gift that makes the angels sing and the shepherds run and the magi travel. It's a gift of love that's not just shown in the story of Christmas, but throughout the pages of the Bible. I mean, if you were just to read through the New Testament, you'll discover that in the Greek, there are three kinds of love that are revealed in the New Testament. This is why translating the Bible is sometimes of a challenge, because in English, we have one word for love. Do you know what that one word is? Thank you. It's not hard. It's just love. And that means every possible kind of love you can imagine, we can only describe with one word. But the Greeks they have four different words, but there's three that they use in the New Testament. The first is storge, which means a natural affection. It's like a familial affection. It's just the love you have for your family because they're your family. Then there is phileo, which means friendship. It's a love you have for other people in your lives. It's a friendship kind of love. And then there's agape. That's the kind of self-sacrificial love that God is demonstrating in Jesus Christ. It's a love that goes beyond friendship. It goes beyond affection. It's a love that Jesus taught and a love to which He calls us. It's a love which is unselfish because it takes the love that we have for ourselves and it transfers it to others without bias or preference. It's a love that Paul writes about throughout all of his letters in the New Testament. Particularly, we'll pick up one reference Paul uses in Galatians 5:13-14. Paul writes to this church in Galatia, "For you were called to freedom, brothers and sisters. Only do not use your freedom as an opportunity for self-indulgence, but through love become slaves to one another. For the whole law is summed up in a single commandment: you shall love your neighbor as yourself." This is a love which commits us to love not only ourselves, not only our friends, not only our families. It's a love that calls us and commits us to love our enemies. A promise of God's love that is radically declared and powerfully revealed. It is this love which Jesus came to renew in us, and a love that will transform this world. I mean, if we're going to be part of this Christmas story, then we have to make the hard choice to love this way. It's a hard choice because loving this world and loving one another requires something of us. It requires us to invest in others. It requires us to give of ourselves. Most of all, this kind of love requires us to be willing to be changed. This Advent, the small group that I participate in has been doing a study called The Redemption of Scrooge. It's based on Charles Dickens' classic A Christmas Carol, which is the story of Ebenezer Scrooge, who throughout several encounters with spirits is transformed from a grumpy and hard-hearted miser to a generous and loving man. The number of Christmas stories that I like to watch follow this same pattern. Our main character often goes through some sort of transformation. In A Wonderful Life, George Bailey rediscovers hope. The Grinch's heart grows 3 sizes. Charlie Brown learns the true meaning of Christmas, and the list goes on. And although these are Christmas stories, they could also be Advent stories. Because Advent is all about getting ready. Advent is all about our own transformation. Advent is all about preparing our heart for someone who is coming and opening it to new ways of being. As Christians, we have been called to transform this world for good. And that's a tall order. It's hard work to change the world. And we can do our best, and we can work for good, and we can pray for peace. But in the end, we learn an important truth. You can't create love in this world until you discover the love that is within yourself. And that love that is within yourself is a love that transforms you. And as you are transformed, you have the ability and opportunity to do transformative work in this world. So if we are serious about finishing Advent strong, if we're really serious about preparing our hearts for the coming of Christ, if we are truly using this season to focus on what is coming, then there's no way we won't be transformed by it. I mean, we may not have a big and miraculous and carol-filled Christmas morning, but inside your heart, if you listen closely, you'll hear the change happening in you as love is filling you. And as powerful as this love is within us, it's even more powerful when we share it. I mean, what if in the face of all that we find troubling in this world, we showed the world what God's love really looked like? What if we showed the world how powerful and redemptive and inclusive God's love really is? I don't know if it's the season, but it reminds me of another Christmas classic. In our house, it's not really Christmas until How the Grinch Stole Christmas comes on. And I don't mean this bad Jim Carrey knockoff, or this attempt to rebrand it and sell more McDonald's toys that's come out this year. I mean the real Grinch, Boris Karloff Grinch. The story of someone who absolutely detested Christmas and went to great lengths to steal it from those he hated. But then he goes out to the entrance of his cave on Christmas morning, waiting to hear the weeping and gnashing of teeth, but only to be greeted by the sounds of the Who's in Whoville singing. And he says to himself, maybe Christmas doesn't come from a store. Maybe Christmas perhaps is a little bit more. And then the story tells us that the Grinch's heart grew 3 sizes that day, and he returns all the things that he stole, and he's invited to the feast, and yes, he even gets to carve the roast beast. But when he saw that the love that the Whos had, when he realized that this love was inside of them and it couldn't be taken away, that's when he realized what it was all about. That's when he was changed from the inside out. And the reality is we aren't Whos from Whoville, but we are Christians. And we are people who spend this time of year preparing our hearts for the one who is yet to come and being transformed in the process. And we have something we can share with this world. We have a story that is worth repeating year after year because Christ still comes into this world, because Christmas still happens. Yes, it may be a story that took place 2,000 years ago. It may be about Mary and Joseph and a baby in a manger and no room in the inn, but that's not the end of the story. The great Christmas story continues to play out, and the incredibly wonderful thing is we're invited to participate in the story. We're invited to choose our own lines and write our own script. And so what will your script say? How will your story reflect God's story and the love God reveals in it? God's love arrived in a deceptively simple package, laid in a manger, approachable by all. And this story, this gift, this promise of God is for everyone. And we could mistakenly believe that Advent is about a squishy and adorable baby who mysteriously appears annually at this time of year, yet this child that is born for us, this son that is given to us, is the Savior of the world. The Advent season invites us to prepare our hearts to receive a love that is humbling in its passion and amazing in its depth. A love that does not fade, does not weaken, or does not diminish. A love that is offered to us fresh and new every day. And what are we asked to do for this love? Much like our romantic proposals, all we're really asked to do is say yes to God and then give it away. Let us pray.